Robinson, for those of you who know, was the first female president of Ireland. She's also a member of the Council of Elders, a group of former heads of state and statespeople that was put together by Nelson Mandela, and that really try to put the world on the right track and respond to issues in a way that is inclusive of everyone and addresses some of the big challenges of our time. And in that conversation, she shared 5 lessons that she thinks the pandemic has taught us and that she hopes carries forward to other issues, but also into the future. And so I thought I'd share those 5 lessons with you because they've really helped guide and shape my thinking over the past year, both in terms of how we deal with COVID-19, but also how we deal with other challenges like the refugee crisis or climate change. And the fact that in 2020 and 2021, the issues that we're facing as a world are more or less issues that face humanity in general, and how we deal with them at home will have an impact on how the world copes with these issues. And if there's one thing that COVID-19, I think, has made very clear for me, is that it doesn't care where you live. It doesn't care what your status or your race or your gender or your occupation is. The virus knows no borders and it doesn't discriminate, but it does have a more severe impact depending on your level of income. We know it has a bigger impact on people who are lower income. We know it has a bigger impact on people who are working in more precarious jobs. And so that while on the one hand, it doesn't discriminate, it does have a differentiated impact. And the 5 lessons that Mary Robinson shared with me are ones that I'd love to have a conversation about and hear your reflections on. But they are that governance matters, that science matters, that collective action matters, that individual action matters, and that most importantly, I think compassion matters. And she was talking about these in terms of how we saw in the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic that the decisions that our government makes will impact the trajectory of the virus. Our decision on whether to listen to and learn from the science will impact the trajectory of the virus. Our ability to act in concert, but also take individual actions will impact the trajectory of the virus. And our ability to be compassionate and see where there are inequalities in our society will have an impact on the trajectory of the virus. And I think that these lessons, as I said, can apply to climate change, which is another issue that we're going to be facing. But I think it's also been clear as different countries have grappled with the virus, the extent to which all of these different issues matter, and whether we can actually take those 5 lessons together will have an impact on how we're able to confront big challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic and other future challenges. And when I think about the first one in terms of governance, I think for me, I've always felt very strongly that government has a significant role to play in people's lives, and recognizing here in Canada the social contract that we have between citizens and their government and the services that are provided. But through the course of the pandemic, the ability of the government and the decision of the government to provide direct supports to people who are unable to work because of COVID-19, to provide direct support to businesses to bridge through the challenging times that we're facing, on the one hand, has enabled us to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 in terms of the expansion of the virus, but also to save lives and to save livelihoods, which is another really important issue. And so whether it was the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the Canada Emergency Business Account, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, these direct benefits had an impact on people's abilities to stay home, to protect themselves, to protect their families, but most importantly, to continue paying for food, paying for rent, and those other essential services. The next one, when it comes to science, is that, there are a lot of questions circulating about when and how decisions were made. But I think as many people recognize, science evolves, and part of science is learning and adapting to those changes as we move. And it's there's a lot of myths and disinformation out there. And I saw a meme recently that said, all these scientists and doctors are saying one thing, but that guy that I went to high school with who failed biology class, he says vaccines don't work. So, maybe I should listen to him. Maybe he has a valid point. And I don't want to dismiss anyone's opinion or ideas. And, I think that's part of the conversation that we're all having. But there is a real importance. And I think that governments at all levels in Canada, municipal, provincial, federal, have really listened to the science on COVID-19. And of course, you can disagree or agree with some of the decisions that various levels, including my own, have made. But at the end of the day, I think they really did listen to the science. And I think that's actually been a benefit for us here in Canada. The third one, in terms of collective action, is that we've seen how all of us acting together can have a real impact on the trajectory of the virus in our community. And I would say that one of the things that I've been so proud of here in Burlington is how much people have followed the rules, how much people have listened to public health advice and guidance. And I think that's one of the reasons why collectively together we've been able to keep the numbers fairly low in our own community. And that's a really good thing and something that personally I'm really proud of. But that collective action also requires individual actions. While all of us are staying home, it also requires that individually we make certain decisions that are going to support that collective action. And again, here's where I think our community has really stepped up to the plate and been truly exceptional. And then the fifth one is compassion. And this is one that I've been trying to exude in spades because, um, this is a really tough time for people. We've, been going through this stay at home lockdown orders for over a year now. And whether it's people who have lost a job, who have lost a loved one, who have lost income, even if it's not a job, whose businesses are struggling right now. Um, you know, I saw a sign the other day that said, remember that the person you're talking to might just be struggling to keep it together right now. Because we don't actually know what the person that we're looking at, talking to, engaging with is going through in their individual lives. And the more compassion that we can show at this time where everyone is struggling to different degrees and in different ways, I think the better off we'll come out of this pandemic. And I hope that that particular one about compassion has also helped us see where some of the cracks in our system are, that we've seen over the past year, and how actually a more compassionate society, one that takes care of their neighbors, of their friends, of those in their community, is one that ultimately is going to be more resilient in the long term. And so for me, these 5 lessons have been really important. And I think we can apply these at the local level, at the federal level, and at the global level. And that's part of how I see my role as a member of parliament, cabinet minister, the Minister of International Development, is how can we apply these 5 lessons from the local to the global? And maybe I'll just conclude by saying that one of the things that I've been most proud of over the past year is how resilient and compassionate people in our community are, but how generous and engaged Canadians have been when it comes to the work that we've done internationally. We are fortunate in Canada to have had the fiscal firepower to provide these direct supports to Canadians to mitigate some of the worst impacts that could have happened had we not made those interventions. But people in the developing world usually don't have those opportunities. In a very difficult conversation that I had with one of my counterparts in Africa, my colleague said to me, my people aren't asking about how they can stay home. They're saying the question they're asking is, do I choose to die of starvation or die of COVID-19? Because there are no government supports that can keep them home and keep them safe. They have to go work in order to put food on the table to feed their families. And Canada's response has been in something that I'm very humbly proud of. This morning before coming on this call, I was part of the ACT Accelerator Facilitation Group. This is the initiative led by the WHO that is raising money to provide diagnostics, so tests, therapeutics like medical oxygen and dexamethasone, vaccines, and health system strengthening in the developing world. Of the $11 billion that have been raised, Canada has provided $940 million of that. We are the fifth largest contributor to the fight against COVID-19 around the world. And that is punching way above our weight. And so when we think about the crisis of our time, which is right now the pandemic, Canada has stepped up and showed up. And I think that's something that we can be incredibly proud of. And I want to finish with just one point, and then hopefully we can get to what I know will be a really rich conversation, is a little point about what we've done in terms of polio. And I know that polio and the polio campaign has been really close to Rotarians' hearts for decades. And actually the work that Rotary did right when it started back in the United States 100 plus years ago, was the work on public health and sanitation, right? And the work and the legacy of Rotary in making some of these really incredible changes that have enabled us in our communities to be healthier over the long term. The work that Rotary and the Government of Canada have been doing since the late 1980s on eradicating polio worldwide has actually built some of the infrastructure, or a lot of the infrastructure in the developing world, that has enabled a pivot to COVID-19 responses. And that's actually really exciting. So, Canada committed last year. I was really proud to make the announcement to the Global Polio Eradication Initiative in partnership with Rotary International, and to get to that last mile. But one of the really cool conversations I had at the beginning of the pandemic was a conversation with my counterpart in Pakistan, who talked about the fact that the investments that we've made over the past 30 years in polio eradication, the community health workers that are on the front lines, that are kind of like the polio SWAT teams, if you will, quickly pivoted, maintained their polio activities, but also broadened it to include COVID-19 surveillance and response, which meant that they could really quickly respond to COVID-19. And those same networks that do polio campaigns are now being utilized to deliver the COVID-19 vaccines right around the world. And so your support that you're providing to help eradicate polio has long-lasting legacy effects in public health and global health. And I just wanted to note that, because I know that sometimes you make these small little investments, but you actually see the just incredible work and your leadership and what it means right around the world. So I'll stop there, and I'm really, really excited to hear from you and to answer any questions as best as I can. So back over to you.
All right, thank you, Karina. I have been told that she has a hard 1:10 leave, so we've got about 14 minutes for questions. Everybody is muted, so if you have a question, please unmute yourself and ask away.
Hi, Karina. It's Esther here.
Hi, Esther.
Do you have any updates on whether or not Canada will be having a vaccination passport?
It's a really good question, and it kind of has two sides to it. A vaccination passport, there's a dialogue happening internationally. I don't know if it's going to be quite a vaccine passport, but there is an international conversation happening in terms of what restrictions or documentation will be required to travel internationally. There's precedents for this. So for example, like if anyone's traveled to East Africa, you can't go if you don't have a yellow fever vaccine certificate. So these are kinds of the conversations that are having internationally, and Canada doesn't want to be outside of those conversations, because we don't want to be in a world where, X number of countries have decided you can only come here if you have a COVID-19 vaccine certificate and Canada doesn't. So we're very active and participating in those conversations. There's a secondary conversation that is one that I'm a little more concerned about, in that some provinces have said that they would require like an internal requirement for vaccine certificates to enter their province. Quebec has been talking about this in particular. That's something that I think is much more complicated and not something that I think we would advocate for, but it's certainly one that's happening within the Council of the Federation right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Karina, I have a question. First of all, not a question, but just a thank you. I think I'm a big admirer of yours, and I think you're doing an amazing job as an advocate for our community. And I really appreciate that, for one, as I'm sure everybody else on the call does. My question, again, more of a statement, but just as it relates to the amount of stimulus that our government has provided for us, which I believe was the correct thing to do. I have a financial background, but also I think the next stage of this, hopefully, knock on wood, as things reopen, we're going to have a situation where there's going to be a bit of a bill to pay. And I think, obviously, one of the sort of the things we read about all the time is how they're going to pay for it, and capital gains always comes up. And right now, of course, capital gains are taxed at half the rate of our regular income tax. So I know it's a bit of an easy target, but we also have another problem here in Canada, specifically with respect to housing in a lot of our communities, where we've seen what I would call really unhealthy growth in house prices in Canada and a number of other countries around the world. But Canada, obviously, we're lucky in some ways that it's such a safe place to live and such a safe place to invest. So I wanted to get your feeling on a couple of things that we could do with respect to calming or cooling our housing market, whether they be something similar to what Australia did or had done with capital controls about foreign investment in our own property, or with respect to some of the tax benefits that come with investing in real estate, and maybe, if we reduce some of those obvious benefits for people that are just purchasing homes as investments to turn and rent to people who need them to live in. Can we kind of kill two birds with one stone there a little bit?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And George, thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate that. Oh man, yeah, the housing market. So I mean, when I ran for office in 2015, this was one of the top things that I was concerned about, but also hearing about in the community. And our housing issues are really different in Burlington from other places around the country. And, I'm on the one hand really passionate about affordable housing, but also about housing affordability. And in Burlington, we have a lack of both. And part of it is we are such a desirable community to live in, that it's really hard, and the market can't really cool it down because there's so much demand to live in our community. And I've had some really interesting conversations, both with former Minister Bill Morneau on this, because we brought in some changes, right? Increasing the minimum down payment for anything over $750,000, which I think was the right thing to do, because a lot of people were holding a lot of debt that was unsustainable, especially if interest rates run up. Now, we haven't seen interest rates go up, and it's unlikely to happen. So now we're in a very similar situation where it's so cheap to borrow money, right? And I think particularly because of the pandemic, we're seeing people take on like huge amounts of housing debt. So that's a concern. The other thing that we did is we created a $40 billion national housing strategy to try and create some variety in the market as well, particularly with regards to rental housing. So in Burlington, again, and really in Canada, we hadn't had any new rental housing built in about 20 years. And so the rental housing stock was really limited and actually quite hot as well. So that was another issue. And then we're now getting into a space where we're doing some like really interesting initiatives. You might have seen on Monday, Minister Hussein, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Services, announced our rapid housing initiative. So it's $1 billion to basically just build housing now. And that's happening in different communities around the country and for affordable housing. One of the challenges that we face is that the housing market is hot and not in different places around the country. And so creating like a one size fits all program for Canada is just challenging in and of itself. But the market in Vancouver and Toronto is very different from Edmonton and Halifax. And so that's one of the issues that we grapple with. I'm always open to innovative ideas and happy to bring them forward to figure out what we can do. I'm personally very worried about a housing bubble, and especially right now where, you know, and I don't know, I see it, I think I'm always wrong in a sense because, you know, for the past 10 years, we keep talking about this housing bubble and prices keep going up, but I just can't imagine that that is actually sustainable over the long run. So I'm very open to any ideas that anyone has and will happily bring them forward to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Children, Families and Social Services, because one of the things that we also did back in 2015 is we brought the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation back into the housing game in a way that it hadn't been for about 10 years. And so we've seen more stock, we've seen more affordable stock, and we're hopefully going to see more of that here in Halton region as well. But it's not necessarily cooling the free market housing stock that's out there as well. Vancouver, for example, has brought forward a vacancy tax, right? So, you know, if they have basically, you know, apartments or houses that just sit empty because they're, you know, investment properties, mostly foreign, that they've put a tax on that. Those are more kind of local decisions as opposed to a federal one, but those conversations are very alive at the federal level to try and address that, because that's certainly not something that we want. Now, some of you who may have investment properties might feel differently about this, but you know, there's also been a bit of a crackdown from CRA as well, because there was a lot of house flipping that was going on and revenues were not actually claimed or you know, it was seen as a primary residence as opposed to a secondary, tertiary, etc. So I think that's one thing that can be done, but yeah, I don't think there's a like a silver bullet to addressing this. I think it's a number of things.
Karina.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, thanks. I had a conversation with a couple of colleagues yesterday who said that they would rather hold out to take the Pfizer vaccine rather than take something like the AstraZeneca vaccine right away. Now, to me, that seems like a bad idea and not a fit with what you were talking about earlier. So what would you have to say to them or to me for that matter?
Yeah, you know what? This is something that I've heard from so many people, and I think that how many of you are on Twitter? Okay, great. If you're on Twitter, follow David Fissman and Dr. Jennifer Kwan. Jennifer Kwan is a family doctor here in Burlington. She does like really fantastic COVID updates, but she put out this tweet that I thought was so great. And she said, just remember that whatever vaccine you get, it's 100% effective against death. Right. So, you know, it's that's really the key here. If it's been approved by Health Canada, obviously, you know, is the key is that most of our vaccines before we had the mRNA technology were somewhere between the 60 to 70% effectiveness rate. So, you know, the AstraZeneca, the Janssen vaccine, they're like kind of the more normal technology that we're used to. The seasonal flu vaccine is about, you know, 65, 66% effective against flu. So this is pretty, like, it's in line with normal vaccines that we get all the time. So you shouldn't feel like, oh, I'm getting like a, the second class vaccine. Like, absolutely not. They are all 100% effective against death. That's like the number one reason why we want to take them. But the other thing about it is that, I understand that. And I've certainly heard from a lot of Canadians, like, I'll just wait and see how it goes, which I understand. But like, the more of us can get vaccinated, the sooner, the more likely we're going to get back to, a more reasonable way of living. And so if you have the opportunity to take a vaccine, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Janssen, those are the 4 that have been approved by Health Canada. They're safe, they're effective, and they're going to protect you and help protect your loved ones. So my feeling, and people often, it's so funny because I was talking with an African counterpart who was like, hey, have you got the vaccine yet? And I was like, no, I'm 33. I'm going to be like way down the line in Canada. And he was like, oh, in my country, like, politicians are the first ones to get vaccinated. And so I'm, if I could get vaccinated today, I would, but I'm going to wait my turn. And I'm going to take whatever vaccine is offered to me, because I know that that's the one that's, that's going to help prevent, the most catastrophic situation.
Okay, we're 9 minutes after. We got one quick question left. Anybody?
I have one question, maybe a good final question as well for this this afternoon is, Karina, do you think that we can celebrate Canada Day all together live, like the US, in the US they will do on Independence Day?
I don't want to make any predictions, Claudia, because I think that, everything is so uncertain. And even for the US to say that, we just don't know yet, right? Like, it's, if you had asked, I think if you had asked me this time last year, like, would we still be here a year from now? I couldn't have imagined that we would be. Like, if you remember when we all went down into lockdown, we were like, 6 weeks, we're gonna end it and like back to it, right? And so I think that even as we all get vaccinated, which, right now with the way, the vaccine deliveries are scheduled to be coming, everyone in Canada should have access to a vaccine if they want one by June. So like, let's cross our fingers and hope for the best. But I think also recognize that Canada Day anyways will still be a little bit different. So I think if I were to give a prediction, I think it'll be more open. And I think you'll be able to, see more people. But do I think that, we'll all be down at Spencer Smith Park watching the fireworks together? I would just be cautious on saying that. But there's hope, there's light.
Keep fingers crossed.
Cross your fingers, and let's just hope that there's no production delays or anything else that could just the factory blows up or something, right? Like, there's so many possibilities that could happen. So let's just like keep chugging along. But I think as warmer weather, people are outside more. Like, I think we're gonna have a good summer. So.
Excellent. Thank you
Thank
for that, Karina. Jonathan, can you please do an official thank you to our guest?
Yeah, Karina, thank you for taking the time today to come and speak to our club. I really appreciate the fact that you acknowledge that not everybody is perfect and there are some lessons that we can all learn. But the one thing that I took out of your talk was, even though we are all individual, a collective mindset is sort of the key to beating any challenge. And you touched on the polio challenge that Rotary has taken on within the global sphere. And as a thank you to coming to our club today, we're going to donate 120 doses of the polio vaccine in your name.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Karina, and thank you, Maddie, for being online as well. I know you have to leave for some other appointment, so thank you, Karina.
Thank you.
Check
Take care,
out, and we will
everybody.
wrap up the meeting. Take care. Thank you.
Bye. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, see you. And we had one more announcement. I saw an email from Tamaya. Is she still online about the cleanup?
Hi, everyone. Part of the commitment that Rotary globally is making is to the environment and helping the environment. So our club is going to participate in the Great Canadian Shoreline cleanup. And we have picked April 24th as the date. So that's from Rotary International as the date. And our club has decided that we will look after the Burlington beach strip. So basically from Spencer Smith, I guess, down to the beach. It will be a private event in the sense that we're not going to publicize it to the public in general, but we are asking Rotarians to certainly welcome teenagers who need volunteer credits, friends, family, and all that kind of good stuff. And unfortunately, because of COVID protocols, we won't be able to gather afterwards and have a snack and all that kind of stuff and hang out. But certainly we can wave to each other and all that kind of stuff. So watch out for more announcements, and certainly email me if you want to participate. And we would appreciate as many people participating as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamaya. So that is it for the meeting. Apologize for the lateness, but we did have a lot of announcements as well as a great speaker. So it happened. Thank you and have a great week. And we will see you back next week. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
And Ian and Uda and Brent, if you guys are still there, and Serena, then we can have our meeting. So thank you. I think we're just waiting for Brent.
Yeah.
I just let Brent know we're starting, so we should be on in a minute, hopefully, very quickly. But it's Brent, so you never know. You look very perplexed there, Jay.
Well, I was trying to remove people that weren't supposed to be here, but then it's like if you try to remove somebody from the meeting, you get a report, which I didn't know happened. I don't really want to report somebody to Zoom, but I
By the
thought as
way-
host I could just kick people out.
Okay. Jay, just for the Neokio sake, did you record this meeting or not?
I started halfway, or not quite. I started near the beginning of Karina's
Okay,
talk. So I got about half the meeting. I was like, oh,
okay. And you stopped it now, it's not recording, or is it still recording?
I am stopping it